Good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock or just shortly after. So let's get rolling into our fourth meeting for our i4.0 Manufacturing Technology Working Group. I'm tuning in from a conference room down here in Washington, D.C. So hopefully all goes well and no technical glitches. Our agenda for today is really just some announcements, level setting of what our intentions are over the coming weeks, and really to work into or to break out into our work streams. So last time we convened, we had identified 4, and we are, as a working group, taking action on 3 of them. So I'll give a little bit of an introduction or a reminder as to why we're here and what we're going to be focused on and discussing. But I think for the sake of time, what we'll do is after we, Corliss and the team breaks us out into our various working breakout sessions, we're not going to come back together because that way, conversations may go longer, especially for the value stream mapping, which is our largest team. So with that, just want to remind everyone that we're maintaining a bi-weekly cadence. And so the next time that we see each other will be on October 27th. For now, what we have done over the last 2 meetings is to highlight a few of our i4.0 service providers. And so with CCAT and Constep leading this working group, Jeff and myself had given a high-level overview of each of our entities and our services to support the manufacturers here in the state of Connecticut. Last time we convened, as many of you may recall, we had Jessica Dodge report out on CT Next. And so that was a really worthwhile discussion, and there was some conversation and engagement around that. So very much appreciate that. We want to keep that going forward. And so as you'll see here, we've lined up each of our service providers over the courses of the really next several months. Again, we're having a bi-weekly cadence here. So up next, the next time we convene, we'll have the University of Hartford provide us with their feature as part of the Connecticut Conference of Independent Colleges, recognizing that there is a dozen or more of those universities and colleges in that system. However, UHeart will be featured again as we're building out our ecosystem and the mapping of providers, and really all of the inclusiveness of entities will build that up over time. But for now, I think with the representatives that we have as part of this appointed working group, we'll just narrow down and focus on a solo. So then you'll see following UConn, and then through the CSCU system, Karen Birch will talk about the NSF National Center for, let me see, move my screen, Next Generation Manufacturing as part of that entity. Again, only solo representing, but again, we'll try to build that out as we need to develop these comprehensive profiles, mapping out that ecosystem. And then you'll see we're heading into the end of the year, which is crazy to believe. But this is hopefully for each of you that are representing these organizations, please take a look at your schedules. Jeff and I had sent out that template of a slide that we've used previously. So you have what you need. And if you require any guidance, Jeff and I are available to have an offline conversation. So we look forward to having the opportunity to really focus and spotlight on our service providers as we continue to convene these meetings. And again, just as an example, this is what we had presented for CCAT, Constep, and CT Next had provided some high-level overview of their services. Again, what we've done at the inception of convening this working group is to get information and input from our manufacturers as well as our service providers via a survey through Google Forms. So again, we want to continue to build up the repository of information and then flow that out to our manufacturers, key stakeholders, and more broadly across the ecosystem. So appreciate your participation and leadership in this space. I think before we want to break out, I'll open the floor potentially to see if there's any announcements, flow down, anything that we want to discuss as a team before we then, go our separate ways into breakout rooms. The value stream mapping team will stay in the main room, so that way the broadcast will contain your conversation in the working group with Jeff. So no pressure there, but having the opportunity, I think, to continue the dialogue, and we'll be able to switch that up over the course of the coming weeks. So again, our 3 work streams we're focusing on are presented here. Those entities and leads are shown by their logos. So with that, I'll take a pause and a breath and monitor either the chat or hand raises to see if there's anything, and I'll look to my colleagues at CCAT or Constep to also jump in before we dive more so into the work that we're all here to discuss in our various work streams.
Jackie, thank you. I just wanted to say one thing. Corliss, is Senator Hartley on? Does she want to say anything? And I do see Senator Martin on as well. Do they want to address the group with anything before we go into the breakout?
Senator Hartley is not on yet, but Senator Martin can feel free if you want.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ron. Just simply, I'm here to observe and to learn, because this is all new to me regarding what you guys are charged to do here. So if I can be of help in any way, if we need, I guess, legislation down the road, that's, I'll have a better handle as to what we're dealing with. So, but thank you, Ron, for asking me to say a few words.
Thank you, Senator, for your support. Obviously, it's an important group, and this legislation has pulled all of us together. And we're all going to really work hard for a good work product that Jackie and Jeff Orzer from Constep are leading. And we'll get a good report to you in March. And I'm sure we'll have a few good ideas for the legislative session coming up.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So Jackie, I guess back to you, or Jeff. Do you want to, how you want to proceed next?
Nope. If there's no more questions or comments, I think we can initiate the breakout rooms.
All righty. So everybody in this main lobby should be in the value stream mapping breakout room. If you're supposed to be somewhere else, please let me know now so that I can move you.
There's also a few that don't have rooms assigned. So if you'd like to go to a different room, Corliss can do that also.
Hey Jeff, I joined late, so where do I?
You are in the right place. If Marty joins, we've sent him to outreach, but we've asked you to be part of Value Stream Map. So that's perfect.
Excellent.
So where do I go? What room?
You're not going anywhere. You're here.
Okay.
We're going to stay live. So,
All right.
So we're the main stage.
Thank you.
All right. We seem pretty good, Corliss.
I think you're good to go.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen.
Should work.
And this is intentionally not, am I sharing?
Yes, you are.
Yes, okay. This is intentionally not in presentation mode because I do intend for it to be somewhat interactive. This is meant to be a working session. But I'm not on slide one. So this is the value stream mapping work stream. And as we've discussed before, I think it will take a couple of sessions for us to kind of lay the groundwork. And I apologize that I didn't get one of those sessions in the intervening 2 weeks. And then my thought, and we can certainly discuss this, is that my thought is that we will do a half-day live session to actually do kind of the mapping exercise. But I think there's some value in creating kind of a charter or boundaries as we move forward. And so just as a reminder of our deliverables, we are to conduct a value stream map or other analysis as needed to assess the flow of services from the entities identified. And I put down there what the definition of the entities are. Such analysis shall include, but not be limited to, identification of the extent to which the services complement, conflict, or duplicate each other, assessment of the relative impact of such services on the manufacturers, identification of the gaps the services provide to the relative to Industry 4.0 technology needs of manufacturers, and identification of barriers and recommendations for achieving the goals of the working group described in Section B. There's also some discussion of the SBIR component, but as you know, we've got a separate work stream to focus on that, and we can I think allow them to do their effort and only do some input as needed in that it impacts the particular service providers. So as we discussed last time, this isn't a typical value stream map. We're not looking at a piece of material as it flows from shipping and receiving out to out through the factory and then back to shipping and receiving. And so want to kind of think through what the boundaries are that we want to cover and how we want to go through that. So the first thing I thought we should do is kind of clarify our problem statement as we're approach this and what we want to define as the outcome of the group and what we're trying to solve. And so and this is the part where I hope we'll get interactive and have some conversation. But trying to clarify what we take the intention of the legislation and how we see ourselves addressing it. And so I kind of took the first part of that and began a definition, but certainly want this to be something we work through. So feel free to comment on the problem statement or what you see as our objectives, and certainly some of the difficulties in meeting them, so we can set some boundaries.
Jeff, I'll chime in if I might.
Yep.
Not with specific language, but I think the legislation mentions as sort of an overarching theme the creation of an ecosystem that complements each other, that doesn't duplicate unnecessarily, meets the needs of manufacturers, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering, when I first read this, I got maybe the impression that there's already such an ecosystem out there. There's just not a clear understanding of it among, whoever, even the providers themselves or the manufacturing community. So I just be interested in people's thoughts about, is the perspective that we already have the ecosystem we need and it's just not well understood. There's no sort of central website to go find it, et cetera. Or is it something more fundamentally structural?
I think, if I may, Eric, I think my thought is both. correct? So there is an ecosystem, how healthy or how well developed that ecosystem is. I think we'll find through this process, but I think there is an ecosystem. I mean, it's not like we're starting from zero, but there's both. There is an ecosystem that may not be totally ready to get us to the next level. And there's also the need to consolidate the information somewhere so people can access. Because I think there is a gap on information, on connectivity. So I at least for me, that there's both pieces.
Yeah, and I had a conversation earlier kind of about the difference between the first work stream and the value stream mapping work stream, the first being the cataloging. And I think, my perception is that the cataloging is really the output of the service providers themselves and what they believe they're delivering, right? And I see the value stream map as the input from the manufacturers about what they're receiving, and trying to both identify gaps between those two different categories, as well as identify gaps where there's, what they need to receive doesn't exist at all. So that would be part of what I hope we accomplish in the value stream map, is by really listening to what you've done, using the service providers that you've used, as well as anticipating what you could do. How can we strengthen that process?
Kathy, what do you have to say?
I like what Eric brought up as far as the ecosystem. I think that's a really important part of what we need to focus on. If we were doing, and sorry for the background noise, I'm actually over at Platt Tech High School, but in their shop. But if we were going to do a Hoshin strategic planning session around this question, we'd all be sitting down and saying, what must we do to create an ecosystem to support Industry 4.0? And then coming up with all the different things that need to be done, and then putting them, not just from a value stream map, but from, from a more aspirational problem solving standpoint, putting them in what drives what is, what do we have to do first that's going to drive the next part of the process. And I'd like to see us work on something like that, because I think that we would get results that would give us that first 15% that gives us the 85% bang for our buck. I'm going to mute.
Jeff, are you able to see the hands? There are a couple of people with hands up.
Yeah and no, and so in trying to dual things, hold on, let me.
Yeah, Sudi, if you're next, I would just say just plug along in the order that you're listed on the screen there.
Okay, I don't know if I was next, but I'll speak up anyway. So on the topic of ecosystems, couple of points to be made. One, I think, to elaborate on how healthy it is, I also think a generic service provider in the Industry 4.0 space might not necessarily be the perfect provider for the small to medium industry. I believe there's a unique set of requirements for the SME sector. There should be an appetite to drive down effectiveness, improve effectiveness, drive down cost, on a whole host of things. So I think we should pay careful attention to not just having a provider who ticks the box, on what type of technology and to have enough credentials in the market, but it needs to be one step lower, deeper, which is the relevance to the SME sector. And the second point I want to make is, obviously, we at Stanley Black & Decker, we've been at it now for about 3 years. So the ecosystem that we have built is fairly strong in the four walls, and now we're adding beyond the four walls the larger supply chain. It's rather weak there. But that said, we certainly are, as most of you know, we're always excited and energized when we can help the larger good work that you all are doing in Connecticut. So you can count us in for sure, and not only to leverage what we already have, but also to hone in on some of the details that we need to filter and identify more providers.
I just want to circle back. I agree with what you just said, and that would be if we actually do what would be necessary to create a i4.0 ecosystem. One of the outcomes of working on that would be exactly that, recognizing that for small businesses it's drinking from a fire hose. So how do we adapt these resources to two different constituencies? But that would be an outcome from that other process.
Yeah,
Yep.
and Kathy,
I can't
Kathy,
see hands now, and Callie, you are next.
Thank you.
I figured out how to do it while I'm presenting.
Well, I wanted to just piggyback on what Kathy and Sudhi were saying, because I 100% agree with you. And I have a hard time of understanding fundamentally how what you guys as service providers do, how it relates to my business. And like, there is not only a clear understanding of how providers' services complement each other, but I really have no concept, even after all these conversations that we have, of how what you guys do relate to my little business. And I think there really needs to be a better way of communicating that to the small to medium businesses, similar to as the other two speakers were saying, because I don't actually understand like how to put them together with my business. I would love to utilize your systems, but until really I can even get that more, it's hard to put it into a 4.0 industry setting. So I don't know if I'm not understanding all the building blocks yet, but to even create that ecosystem, I feel like we need to have a better understanding of what those building blocks are.
That's a really good point. I agree with that 100%. And I think one of the ways that we can approach this is you have the perception and you have reality, right? So you could have all these great things out there happening, but if myself and other folks in the manufacturing industry don't understand them, don't know about them, don't see the need for them, then it really doesn't matter how robust they are. So one of the ways I think we can approach this as a value stream is the process that a small business would go through in obtaining services, and the end of the value stream would be realization or completion of that process. So there's a lot of things that go into that. So if I'm looking at some type of new industry 4.0 technology, there would be services out there for analysis of what I would need, the equipment or technology itself, training, and funding. I think those are probably the four main areas that are represented here and that we would need to consider before making that decision. So as a manufacturing company was to go through that process, figuring out what they need, where to get it, how to implement it, the actual implementation, that seems to be the course that the legislation is looking for, but also it makes sense for us to look at that as well. Because before we get too far ahead of what like this ideal state should be, we really need to look at what do we have now and how is it working? And then we can go back through and fill in the gaps and design an ideal future state.
It certainly was my expectation of what we would be doing, and really, I had hoped that I chose a group that really could expound upon what they've done, how they've done it, both and partly picking Sudhi on this team with the benefit that they've gone through it. And so when you guys point out gaps that you might have in that course, he can show that that's something that exists, right? As having that experience. So I think that's my hope, and that would be what I hope we do on that kind of half-day session, if we're in agreement that that's what's needed.
If I may jump in,
Yep.
I'm Cindy Bombard. I'm president of the Central Connecticut Chambers of Commerce, but we also manage two rather large manufacturing associations under our umbrella. And I'm also the president of CASE, which is the Connecticut chapter of Chamber Executives. So I wanted to share with you what we're hearing from all of our manufacturers is they just don't know where to go with whatever it may be, from workforce development, from incumbent worker training dollars, from the training programs, because there's so much of everything and not just one-stop shopping. So we put on a lot of programs to try to help our manufacturers to work the course, the map, the grid, if you will, to figure out where do they go. And some of my manufacturers are on here today. We do the best we can as a Chamber of Commerce to help, because my phone will ring and they'll say, how can you help me? And then I step off and then I reach out to my contacts, whether they be a business service rep in one of the areas, one of the many areas, whether it be advanced CT, Constep, you name it, CBIA, whomever. So it's really confusing for the GM or the owner of these companies to just work the whole thing, unless they have a particular department within their plant to do all that for them. And many of them, as somebody had mentioned, are just small shops. So they don't do anything.
One of the MIF initiative, new MIF initiatives that the governor is going to announce tomorrow here at AG Russell is a comprehensive manufacturing website. And perhaps that can, the intent being a one-stop shop for manufacturers to be directed to the resources that are available. So that's one thing that we can look forward to anyway.
Yeah, and Cindy, I don't want to, I mean, you certainly are welcome to stay. We had originally actually put you on the outreach committee. And I don't know if Ginger or Corliss can help you get to that work stream if you'd like to. But I think we had identified that as you being your primary interest. So you're welcome to stay, but if you'd like to move over, they can send you.
Yeah, I would love to move over if somebody wants to move me.
Ginger, is that something you're able to do?
Oh, I got it.
I just did it. Yeah, there you go.
All right.
That's all set.
Okay, great. Thank you. So again, so are we all in a basic agreement that, as a session, we should go through and look at what a manufacturer has done to utilize the value stream and how that process would flow for them?
I did put something in the chat. I don't know if everyone can see it. But I think what we're doing here is we're starting to solve the problem. And I'd like to, in our planning, take a step back and, take that ecosystem and then try and identify what is the first step in creating that, and the second step and the third step, and then we can start working on those. Because right now, while we're all smart and capable and probably are right in our guesses as to where we start, I've done these Hoshins over the years and been very surprised sometimes by what ends up coming out being that first 15% that we should focus on. That's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck. It's classic, Deming.
Yeah, and I think, Kathy, that we weren't trying to solve the problem, but understand the current state, right? Understand what part of the ecosystem has already existed and being used, and how that is connected. And then we can look beyond that to start to understand how to solve the problem.
Right. And I think that understanding that current state is probably going to be one of those first 15% things. And Eric, has done a ton of work with the what became the Connecticut Manufacturers Collaborative. And we did some value stream mapping on some of the education ecosystems. So I'm so sorry about the noise. So I think that there's probably a lot out there that we can access that will help us with that process. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry.
Jeff, so this is really helpful. I'm still feeling the tension a little bit about, as B described it, sort of the duality of the ecosystem itself versus the understanding of the ecosystem out there. You mentioned starting with where things stand now, which I think is great. I think at least in addition to maybe the input of some sophisticated companies that have already gone through this, I'm hoping at this point that, B, maybe you and your team have worked with some smaller, less sophisticated companies that have also gone through it, but they've gone through it from the perspective of a small manufacturer. So just want to.
Well, that's me, Eric, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's me. My sister Lucia, and all of the programs that we've done with the state have been basically because of relationships, right? You guys are like, oh, you guys should totally qualify for the MIF, and we're like, okay, great, we'll figure out how to put it together. It is difficult to find any playbook to say, this is what I need to do, and now which large agency can help me with that, or what's the steps there. So I can give you 3 examples of the things that I need to do that I'm struggling to do. And if we could map out an ecosystem that I would know my flow chart to go to, I would love that. Like I need to implement locations. I need to put in I have got a whole slew of things. I just don't know where to go. So there might be an ecosystem, but from the small manufacturer's perspective, I don't know how I fit into that.
Right.
And I'm trying not to beat a dead horse on this one.
No, I guess what I was trying to say is I think, at least I know that the concepts in the process of creating a process or program for that kind of situation, to create that kind of playbook. And I don't want to, B, you and Jeff can speak better to that than me, but again, my point was so that, a company like MDL winds up having a tool and that is based significantly on the perspective that you're bringing to the table right now.
So Beatrice, you want to come
one thing is that, that we need to be a little careful with is I totally agree that there's a need for a playbook. This is the word we use, but a map of the ecosystem and a central location where everybody can go and find all the tools. I think in the scope of this work group, we have to be careful that we don't. This is a subset of that, correct? So here we're very focused on i4.0. Now, I think it's a fair discussion through the work group to identify and put it in the parking lot and say, this will provide resources on i4.0, and then the group recognizes that there should be a need to do the rest. And we go back to some of the work that we keep going back and forth. The website, I always get very concerned when we talk about just a website. I think we should talk about basically what Kathy is saying. Let's walk the process to get to a point on identifying what's the best methods of delivery. Because we always think about the website and then someone builds a website. Sir had one, CityNext has another one, People don't know about the website and nobody maintains it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the idea is, first of all, what's the need? And in this case, we gotta be careful that we scope it around 4.0, i4.0, because that's the mandate under this board, with the recognition that this is a symptom of a bigger problem, correct? And the problem is when I hear you say, I get programs, access to programs because of my relationships, or because the chamber, you know, when we had here the chamber saying people call me and I go somewhere else. Historically, it's been very relationship dependent. And as people move out and retire and so forth, companies are left orphans because the relationship moves away. And what we want to create is a system that, you know, survive us all, per se, something that is inside the ecosystem. So we gotta, I think we have one subset of a problem here that is reflective of a bigger problem that we may want to, you know, park for now.
Hisham?
You know, listening to the last few meetings, and you can tell that there are people who figured it out and they are doing something, or they have a website, and there are others who do not know where to start. And it looks like it's a connection. If you know somebody, you get what you are looking for, and they will tell you what to do. From my side, I'm the talent provider. We are training students that you're gonna hire eventually. So sometimes the needs are not defined. I need somebody to do this. What's that? So if the needs are defined, then it is easy to say, well, it's relatively easy to say that this is what we need to train people for. This is what we need to prepare for us, for the small businesses. This is where I go if I want this one. This is where I go if I want this one. Unfortunately, websites are created for many, many, many reasons, and they are not maintained as somebody mentioned. So it's not just the website, it's the roadmap. I think somebody mentioned it earlier. The building blocks, we need to identify them. I think I just like what you, Trace, you said about subset of things. If we look at the subset, what are they? What we need to? Because the needs are different from different companies. And again, it looks to me as an academic, as a talent provider, there are people who are doing it. And there are people who do not know where to start. So how can we get those two together? Maybe a periodic workshop, a periodic training on where talents are, where things are, will solve the problem. But for small businesses, maybe they don't have that department to go in and look what's the latest in technology. I remember somebody from PTA was saying, oh, I have questions, I need help, but I don't know where to start, where to go. I was like, yeah, but there are small business administration, there are a lot of things you could get. So that's my view. So I like the two ideas, subset of things and the building blocks, but the website, while it's great, I don't think it's going to help us much.
So,
and I would like to second, add a few points to what Julie was saying. I think the Hoshin process actually does a lot of these things, and it puts it all together in a meaningful way. For example, what is the purpose of a website? What are we trying to accomplish with a value stream? I think we need to start with that. And then we talk about the shortfalls of the things that we need. So I really second what Kathy is saying, to see how we can get that Hoshin process started and see if we can hone in on all of the things and pull into, and what it does really well, it pulls it all together. And so it starts with the objective, what are the goals, what are the shortfalls of the critical components, timeline, what's the cadence of how you measure progress, the whole bit. It puts it all together in a very nice, concise form.
And so just to circle back to that, if we talk about defining everyone's needs, and we talk about what is the current environment as far as resources, in a Hoshin, you'd say which drives the other. which is the one that you want to focus on first. And logic would say, what is everybody's needs? But there's a process for that, and so going through the Hoshin would give us, what do we work on first? What do we work on second? What do we work on third? So that's why I really like that process. And I'm going to mute again because Channel 8 just got here and it's going to get noisy.
So I agree with all of that. And I think there's been a lot of really good points today. And it doesn't really matter to me if we go Hoshin route or a value stream, because they all start with the same thing, right? We have to establish the current state. And a lot of this conversation, I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, talking about solving the problem when we really don't know what the problem is yet, because we haven't identified. We might have ideas what it is, but at some juncture, we're going to have to start putting pen to paper and getting some action going, and not talk as much in hypotheticals and what we think is out there, and really start mapping this out, because that's what our charge is some action here. And so I would like us to, maybe we know when we're meeting. They had the every 2-week thing up earlier. So we could, if nothing else today, why don't we think of what we would like to accomplish in those meetings, or at least start? Because at the end of this, we're just going to have a lot of really good conversations week after week. And we're not going to have delivered anything to anybody. So that's what I would like to see, is just the start of some action here.
Yeah, no, that's fine. And we are going to pull in one of our continuous improvement facilitators to help keep us on track. And I'll bring those points to him. He was with a client today, pre-scheduled, so he couldn't join us. My thought was, I don't actually want to wait 2 weeks. I think we, as a group, have a bigger task than the 2-week cadence will allow us to go. And so my hope today, and maybe we can discuss this a little, is that we would get together in the interim. Certainly the plan is to use these breakout sessions every 2 weeks, but I'd like to get together in the interim to help do some of that definition and pick a time when he's available. And so see if that's something that is agreeable to the team.
Are you envisioning that to be a live meeting? Like in person?
I think we could still do one more 1-hour Zoom session to help bring that together, but then from that we would plan a live meeting.
Could Sudi, maybe, since he's got some experience with Hoshins as well, maybe partner with the Constep person to, well, first of all, do people agree that a Hoshin would be a valuable exercise for us to conduct? I guess that would be my first question.
Yes.
Can we?
And again, we're called the value stream work
That's
stream.
a different thing though, Jeff.
Yes.
That's a different thing.
Sorry, Kathy, excuse me, please. We're called the value stream work stream because that's what's called out in the legislation. I think we certainly have the flexibility to use the tools that will best accomplish what the legislation was looking for, even if that's a different language.
Jeff,
Yeah,
I
and
think
I think one will lead to the other.
yeah, I was about to say that I think value stream mapping is still what we're doing. It's just the methodology we use is just Hoshin.
I just want to be respectful that we, had some specific language called out, and so that's why we're using it.
Makes sense. And to answer your question, I have a person who is well versed with Hoshin, and his name is Marvin Piles, and I can make some time available of his to help with this exercise. Okay.
So we can take the action to get him connected with Frank Murphy, and make sure we divide and conquer there. Is everybody willing to meet again next week at some time to continue this? And I know we all have trouble finding calendar slots that are only a week away, but I want to keep us moving forward.
So is that a
We
process?
can send a poll. We can send a
meeting?
poll and see what people need to do.
And I will also send a poll for a half-day meeting a little further out, but want to capture that since that'll obviously be a bigger chunk of time.
So the next meeting then will be to initiate that process, the Hoshin exercise?
Yes. Yep.
And we can do that virtually, okay?
We can start virtually and then we'll gather together to do it more in person, the stuff that needs to be done.
Great.
Okay.
I'm
Anything?
excited.
We're actually ahead of schedule. Anything anybody else wants to add?
No, I think it'll be a great start.
Okay. All right, Corliss, our arrangement was we were just going to end, but we are the live stream. So you think that's fine? I guess we can't end the meeting because that'll kill the rooms, right?
I can end the stream and keep the
Rooms going.
rooms active. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's probably the best thing. So for those on the live stream, thank you for joining us, and those who participate, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself, Jeff Warzak at CADSTEP, or Jackie Garifano at CCAT, and we appreciate your being part of this. Thanks, Ginger.
Thank you.
All right, and the live stream is stopped? Nope.
No, just give me 1 second. I think Corliss
Oh.
has to do it.
That's fine. I just want us all to be aware.
So that was some interesting comments about the website. Do you know if Colin's going to join us for the 12 o'clock?
I had a
Eric.
conversation with him last week on
Careful,
that.
careful. We're
I
live.
offered-
We're live still. Just be aware
Yeah.
we're still live.
Yeah, so I don't know that he is able to join. He says that he has a conflict with this time.
Oh, okay.